All right, this is the moment we've all been waiting for. We have Kshama Sawant in the building, so it is my esteemed pleasure to introduce to you Kshama Sawant.
My sisters and brothers, thank you so much for your patience. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all your activism and Building 15 now. I cannot apologize to you enough for making you all wait, and you have no idea how much I appreciated your patience.
That's okay.
It was kind of a dramatic or anticlimactic day in Seattle. It depends on which way you look at it. Depends on which side you're on. And so I will talk about what happened today. But I think what happened today will make a lot of sense if we go a little bit into the past and just trace our footsteps into why we are even here today, how we got here today. The whole topic of the headlines in Seattle today has been about the mayor's committee and what they did do or did not do. But what the corporate media will systematically leave out in their narrative is that we would not be talking about $15 an hour had it not been for grassroots efforts. We made this happen. The mayor of Seattle will not want to admit it, but we know the truth, that it was fast food workers, the labor movement that made CTAC Prop 1 happen, and our historic campaign to get a socialist elected to Seattle City Council. And look how there can be tidal waves of change even in short periods of time. When we launched our campaign last year, it had been only a few months since the fast food workers in New York City had courageously marched out of their jobs demanding 15 and a union. And I would like to take a moment for all of us to imagine the tremendous courage that you need as a low-wage worker when you have no other cushion in your life, nothing else, nothing and nobody else to stand by you, to take your life in your hands, know that your employer will retaliate against you, that you will probably lose your job, your only source of livelihood, and yet to do that, not just for themselves, but for everybody else among the working class. That's the real solidarity that is latent amongst us in the working class that we have to bring to the fore, and the fast food workers have shown far, far more courage than I could ever show, and I really want to salute them with an applause. Struggles came, the social conditions obviously came from the capitalist system, but the courage to speak out against it, the willingness to stand out against the status quo really is built in by the system, and it all started in this age today for us. It started with the Occupy movement, and despite all the many disparaging stories in corporate media about the unwashed young people who just needed to go and get a job, Occupy did us such a tremendous service. Occupy ended the silence on economic inequality and injustice. And in 2012, in the wake of the winding down of Occupy, when all people, whether you want to call them liberal, left, progressive, whatever, were all told by the Democratic Party establishment, you better stop all this and hunker down and do GOTV, get out the vote for Obama, get out the vote for all the Democrats, because that's what you're supposed to do as a good liberal. Obama and the Democratic Party establishment has betrayed us on every count. Whether you talk about... Whether you talk about deportations or domestic surveillance or income inequality or the Keystone XL pipeline and climate change, we have seen nothing change. Instead, there has been an intensification of attacks against public education. And I can tell you firsthand, because I'm a community college teacher, and I have seen our budgets being squeezed out. 70% of the union I belong to is adjunct faculty, including myself. We don't know from one quarter to the next if we're going to have a job. We have no benefits, no question of health care. So we're not just talking about fast food workers, we are talking about a whole array of the 99% that has been completely left behind, being pushed into the darkness of the race to the bottom, while the millions, and not just millions, but billions, and not just billions, but trillions are being accumulated by the real minority at the top. And that is somehow being justified by both parties. And in 2012, when we were being told that, Socialist Alternative decided we're not going to simply argue against the Democrats in principle, we're going to show what a real independent working class candidate looks like. And we ran against the Democratic Speaker of the House, Frank Chop, and we stunned the establishment by our temerity to run against the most important and the most powerful, arguably the most powerful Democrat in the state, and we got 29% of the vote. Woo. That's 20,000 votes, my friend. Yeah. And we took that momentum into our campaign for city council. At the same time, the CTAG battle was starting to shape up. And look, as I was saying, look how quickly things changed. At this time last year, people were laughing at us. The media and the political pundits who've been hyperactive since we got elected were poo-pooing this idea of $15 an hour. And, let alone the idea of an avowed socialist being elected. That was beyond the pale. And we put this on the agenda. We ran on a campaign of $15 an hour minimum wage for all workers in Seattle, taxing the rich to fund mass transit and education, and affordable housing and rent control. They said none of this would happen. None of this would see the light of day. And yet, towards the sort of halftime of the campaigning season, we could see that something was changing. And just before the campaign ended, less than a month before election day, the mayor, the person who's now the mayor, Ed Murray, who was running for mayor last year, came out in support of $15 an hour. And this, my friends, is not a victory for the Democratic Party establishment. This is a victory for us because we forced them to stop ignoring it. We made it impossible. We made it politically unviable for the leading mayoral candidate to ignore this. They were afraid that they might actually lose the election if they did not come out in support of 15. That's the power of majority opinion.
Yeah.
15 Now grassroots campaign, and I'm so delighted that we have this force developing in Portland as well. I'm delighted that we have an independent candidate who is running for city council. These are important developments. And while we launched the grassroots campaign, while we have been urging others like us in the working class to run as independent candidates, while we have been taking the voice of the working class in Seattle to all over the nation, the mayor set up a committee which admittedly included me and included many members of the labor movement, also included the Seattle's Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce. Do you know who the Chamber of Commerce represents? Yes. It represents Boeing, Microsoft, Amazon.com, Starbucks, Nordstrom's, Target, Walmart, Sam's Club. These are the people who were invited to the table to make a decision on the fates of 100,000 workers in Seattle who make the city run and yet continue to live in poverty.
Boo.
And the way events have shaped so far have proved us right in our predictions that regardless of how much support the establishment says it is going to give us on 15, it is never going to be a substitute for building on the ground. And let us never forget that we can never be complacent. On the contrary, we haven't done enough. We need to keep building, keep mobilizing. And what has happened on the committee? When the committee was formed, I agreed to join that committee on the condition that I would not be bound to any restrictions on my activism outside the committee. And it was good. It was a positive thing that the mayor agreed to that without, unbegrudgingly. But the reality is that the forces that are going to be arrayed against $15 an hour are going to be active regardless of any one person's good or bad intentions. So I would urge you that whether it is the question of the mayor of Seattle or Obama or anybody else, it is not, our job is not to sit and speculate what is going on in their brains. It is not our job to be mind readers. Our job is to understand the nature of class struggle. And the nature of class struggle as it is in the United States is that both the Democratic and Republican parties are working in the interests of big business and the super wealthy. Yep. So no matter what the mayor says, no matter what he pledges, he, unlike us, is answerable to the Starbucks lobbyists, to the McDonald's lobbyists, to Amazon.com. We are not. We are not answerable to them because we did not take a dime of their money.
Yeah! Woo!
And we are setting an example of what kind of politics the working class needs. The working class needs independent candidates who are bold in stating their allegiance, their loyalty. Our loyalty is only to the working class, to those who are oppressed and marginalized. Our loyalty is not to the CEOs, and we don't apologize. We don't apologize for that. And at every step of the way, we were told we should. That's too much. That's too in your face. You should be timid. You should tone it down.
Never.
Yes, I was also told that it's especially unseemly in a woman to be saying these things.
Oh.
So whatever they were hoping, it ended up having the opposite effect. The mayor's with the idea of coming up with what the mayor said, and it's not just him, it's the whole political establishment, what they call a reasonable solution for the problem of income inequality. And to find this reasonable solution, a committee was formed that was half populated by the very forces that have been responsible for this income inequality. The very corporations that keep their workers in poverty. And so we had predicted going in that this committee is not going to be capable of coming up with a solution that actually works for the working people of Seattle, for low-wage workers. And for 4.5 months, this committee has met and has deliberated many hours. You know, I was there for, at least for the full committee discussions. There was a lot of private discussions that I was not part of course. But as a committee, we met for several hours. We had economists from the University of Washington and UC Berkeley come in and give us absolutely thorough and academically rigorous analysis from 1,500 different studies that show decisively that putting a substantial increase of wages in the pockets of low-wage workers not only improves their standards of living, but has a boosting impact on the local economy. At first, the discussion around the table was, who said 15? Well, one of the business owners I talked to said, I'm editing some of his choicest words here, but he said, I am outraged that I have to be here discussing 15. My workers are black and Latino kids who don't know anything. I have to show them how to clean a toilet with a toilet brush. I have to show them how to chop a tomato. Why should I be paying these workers 15? They should be paying me for all of it. But you know what? They could not say these things in public, and we should acknowledge this as a victory for the movement, because they are no longer able to say that and yet be considered, good human beings.
Yeah! Woo! Woo!
That's because we were the opposite of timid. And when I say we, I don't just mean our campaign or socialist alternative, but I'm talking about working people in Seattle in general who have embraced the question of $15 an hour and are coming out more and more and saying, no, this is what we need. A recent opinion poll that was conducted, a randomized poll, showed that nearly 70% of Seattle's likely voters prefer a strong $15 measure without any of the commonly demanded loopholes by business. It's very hard for big business, with all the millions of dollars that they have, it's very hard for them to speak against 70% of a city that wants something. And this has been the force that has stood us in good stead. And so the battle lines moved from challenging the number 15 or the question of a minimum wage increase to another terrain. So now you started hearing businesses saying, oh, I've always been for 15. The mayor said this was his dream since he was a child. I'm all for 15. I agree with you that there should be a solution for income inequality. However, we have to do this thoughtfully. We can't ram it through like the extremist 15 now. We have to make sure that this does not kill businesses. And despite all the information that has been provided to them by economists from the two universities that I mentioned, this conversation has gone on until today, and it will go on beyond today. Now they're saying they'll support 15. However, we need tip credit, meaning if workers get tips on their job, then those tips can be counted as wages. No matter the fact that the states, Washington State's voters, already spoke in 1988 in large majorities, rejecting the idea of tip credit and demanding, this was the voters' mandate, demanding that all workers be held at the same minimum wage. They are using our battle for $15 an hour to overturn a victory that was already achieved by us in the past.
Yep.
We have to be vigilant against this.
Yes.
We cannot accept this simply because we're getting 15 in name. We have to stand against tip credit. The other thing they're talking about is healthcare credit. If you're enrolled in your employer's healthcare program, and if they spend a certain number of dollars per hour on your healthcare, then they can deduct that from your minimum wage. And we've said, look, we want workers to have 15 plus tips plus healthcare. What you're saying, what you're saying amounts to 15 minus tips minus healthcare. You can't take your healthcare card and buy a loaf of bread at the grocery store. You need wages, you need spendable dollars. We need the standards of living to be improved in a real way. We don't want a Swiss cheese 15, we want a real 15.
Yeah.
And so the committee has, gone on for 4.5 months without reaching a conclusion. But as we said today in our press conference, this was a foregone conclusion because this was an artificially appointed committee which brought together two groups with completely divergent goals. One group of labor and left, which wants to improve the standards of living of workers and give them 15, and another group that is trying to ensure that they pull every trick out of the hat to make sure that their workers remain in poverty. The other thing they've been trying to do is to make sure that whatever phased-in 15 is passed does not have cost of living adjustments for workers until the phase-in period is over. Now, you don't have to be a math graduate to know that if we let that happen, then it's not going to be a real 15. Washington state voters, again, through another initiative, spoke in great majorities in 1998 that minimum wage should be tied to inflation. Again, this is another way in which they're using the $15 struggle, our struggle, to undermine our past victories. We don't want a solution where it's one step forward and 2 steps back. We reject that. And we're showing them that we are vigilant. But our task now is to mobilize the movement to a heat that Seattle hasn't seen in a long time.
Woo.
And you all have to be there with us on Saturday because we need you. We need you to win 15 in Seattle so that we can come back here and help you win 15 in Portland.
Yeah.
Now, activists have also filed ballot initiatives and charter amendments as a safety net for the workers in case the process of the mayor and the city council fails. The city council is supposed to be deliberating a possible ordinance on 15 during the months of May and June. They need to hear our voices. They need to hear our feet stomping on the streets of Seattle. They should not be able to forget for even a single moment who they are supposed to be accountable to. They have to be accountable to the workers of Seattle. And today, when the mayor went on his press conference to announce that he didn't have an announcement to make, he said that I am trying hard to reach a majority on the committee because we want a civil engagement in this process. I say there is nothing more civil than the working class rising up and demanding its rights. putting pressure on the City Council in the next several weeks to make sure that a strong $15 measure is passed as an ordinance. I will be doing whatever I can inside City Hall, but we have to work together outside City Hall because that is really going to determine what the council members will do. Because they have Starbucks lobbyists whispering in one ear and McDonald's lobbyists whispering in the other ear. So we have to be loud and clear. And the workers' movement will decide on Saturday, April 26th, whether or not to go ahead and start collecting signatures for one of the initiatives or amendments that have been filed. This is, I mean, think about it, my brothers and sisters. This is so beautiful. This is a real democratic process starting to unfold. It's still very, very early stages, but this is what we're fighting for. You know, we don't want the higher echelons of power to be deciding our fates because we know how they're going to go. They're going to go the way our fates have gone this far, which have led us nowhere real fast. We need to fight against that. And the mayor, again, you know, has several times spoken about, and not just him, many people in the political establishment, my colleagues on the City Council have spoken quite eloquently on how if a ballot initiative or charter amendment goes on the ballot, that would divide the city. The most divisive and destructive thing has been this pervasive income inequality, where people are not able to pay for their basic needs. And it is extremely important for low-wage workers, for social justice activists, community organizations, and the organized labor movement to stand together and stand strong at this moment. There's a tremendous responsibility on the shoulders of the labor movement. They have the wherewithal and the resources to help this movement grow. And we have been, you know, the labor movement has done a fantastic job in CTAC. We need the same kind of energy and fervor in Seattle as we start knocking on doors, appealing to more and more workers to join the struggle actively. We've been told that if we go the ballot route, that would be class warfare. We're trying to gently remind them that this is capitalism. It is class warfare. And as one of the writers I admire, Barbara Ehrenreich, said, so far it has been like aerial bombardment from the super wealthy towards the rest of us. What's changed in Seattle is not that there is a new class warfare. What's changing is that workers are starting to fight back, and I would say about time.
Yeah.
I know that Oregon State has, I think the state law says that municipalities cannot pass their own minimum wage law, is that right? So that will be a challenge for us. But just to give you an example of how this might have come about, I don't know the history of what happened in Oregon, but in 1988, something else happened in Seattle in addition to the initiative that brought all tipped workers to the same minimum wage. There was a strong move in Seattle towards rent control. How many of you support rent control? There may be some confusion about what it actually means, but what rent control does is it brings the cost increases in housing into the realms of the consumer price index, meaning it's not like this, it's like this. It doesn't mean that rents are static, but it brings rents into the realms of what working people can actually afford. And I'm not sure what the situation is like in Portland, But in Seattle, it's increasing. So it's like Seattle, costs are skyrocketing. And in the 80s, there was a move towards rent control, and the state legislature reacted to it by outlawing rent control statewide. This is what they will do. And we have to remember that while we should use every legalistic and other maneuvers available to us, other avenues available to us, sometimes the right thing to do may be to challenge existing laws.
Yes.
And we may need to do that. So I would really appeal to you, let's keep building Portland's 15 Now movement. I would also appeal to you, as a socialist, as a member of Socialist Alternative, please seriously consider joining Portland's new branch of Socialist Alternative. It's fine if some of you are hesitating. I'm happy to talk about it with you. If you have questions, there are lots of people who will be able to answer your questions. And you should have questions. I had lots of questions when I joined before I joined Socialist Alternative. But the reason I mention this is because where we have come today is not incident or the other way around. The fact that Socialist Alternative has led our campaign to City Council and 15 Now is not incidental to the fact that we have had so much success. Just imagine a small group of a few hundred people throughout the nation has been able to force the Seattle political establishment to follow our agenda. This does not happen every day. And it happened because of Socialist Alternative's perspectives, political analysis, our willingness to seriously debate and discuss within the organization, but act in a unified manner, act in an organized manner, our willingness to take up local struggles that will energize and activate young people, retirees alike, our willingness to engage in politics. This is what has got us this far. And I would really urge you that if you are excited by 15 Now, then you shouldn't just stop there. You should go one step further and think about whether you would like to join Socialist Alternative. Have a serious conversation about it. It's okay if you don't feel ready, but have that conversation. Come to Seattle on Saturday for the 15 Now National Conference. It will be incredible. There's going to be hundreds of people there. It will be just a rare opportunity to meet activists from all over the nation. And finally, but not the least, I appeal to you all to please donate to help retire our campaign debt so that we don't have to keep looking backwards and we can keep moving forwards. Solidarity.